Evening everyone, my name's Jon N. Addict. Yeah, thanks for meeting. Do you know, so all day I've not really been that nervous, right? And then on the car on the way here, as we pulled in, I saw some people I know, and it sort of dawned on me that, oh, this is my sponsor's home group. And instantly I then started thinking, right, I need to basically pitch it. I need to impress everyone. I need to do this amazing message, because, you know, if I don't, then what's going to happen is you know, it's going to go around all the group chats that there's a really shit chair, and so we're going to go back to Southampton, and everyone's going to laugh me out of CA, right? And that happened literally from getting out of the car to getting to the door. And it's because, like, I suffer with a massive lack of perspective on everything. Right, my head can go in an instant, and when it does, I would pick up a drink, because I believe that everything that's happening in my head is fact and is not just made up bollocks. And as a result of going through the steps, it's not like that. You know, I've got that time where I can pause. You know, I'll reach out to someone and I share whatever's going on in my head, and those thoughts go. You know, but I got introduced to CA through a 12-step rehab a few years ago, and you know, I rocked up there fully thinking that I was there because I was depressed. Certainly wasn't an alcoholic. You know, I didn't drink on park benches. You know, I had a good job. I was there because I'd recently got divorced. My mum was very ill. Lockdown had been tough. And my understanding of it was my problems started probably about a year before. You know, that's when my problems with booze started. Now I understand that my problem with alcohol has gone back decades. Right, it's gone back really to the first time I had a drink. Or the first time that I got drunk I was 12. My brother had a house party, and I always felt like I would always be out, but I always felt like I experienced things behind a pane of glass. Yeah, so I was never fully involved in anything. I found it really hard to have any connections with people, because I had this constant fear that I'd always be judged. But as soon as I had a drink, that pane of glass went, and I was the party. You know, I could be the person that I thought I should have always been, and more importantly, I could be the person that I thought you wanted me to be. And it went on like that for years, and you know, and this was, you know, there were no consequences. I was getting drunk in the park. There were no consequences, you know. But what I realised is that every time that I would have been challenged to have grown as a person and faced a fear or faced something I felt uncomfortable about, rather than doing that, I had a drink, and I thought that was dealing with it, and it wasn't. All I was doing is just blowing up my own ego for years and years and years and years. And you know, and it worked well for a long time. You know, I've had good jobs. You know, I was in a relationship, got married, nice house. On the outside, I looked like I had everything going, but I was never satisfied on the inside. So you know, with a house. Right, I wanted a bigger house. You know, we had holidays, wanted more holidays. You know, clothes, wanted more clothes. I wanted more of everything. Constantly looking for something else to fix me, because I wasn't happy with who I actually was, or what I was doing in life. So even if I got a job, within 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be looking for another job that pays me more money. And that went on until basically the wheels fell off. So I got divorced in 2018. I had a green light to basically go and have a party for 6 months, get it out of your system. that went on for basically 5 years. And then I tried to move. That was the problem. You know, my house was full of alcohol. I tried to give it all away, which everyone was like, great, we'll take it. And then I'd just go out to the shop and buy it all back. You know, I tried to move. That didn't work. I've went on to other fellowships like retreats. That didn't work. And then I thought, right, what I need to do is the problem now is my boss. It's, you know, the relationship I was then in, I always blamed her and was like, oh, it's toxic because of her job. I was the toxic person. Like, everything that I was accusing her of doing, I was doing and more. And I thought, right, what I need to do is I need to move to Bali. That is my logical thing. I'll move to Bali. I'd been there a few years before for like 10 days. I know the island really well. And I'll go out there and set up a bar. Never run a bar, never worked in a bar, but I'll go and set up a bar. And we didn't. What happened was we went into lockdown, all flights got cancelled, and I ended up in the Priory. And I was there for 28 days, and I thought I was there for depression. I argued with everyone coming in doing H&I. It's not a disease. I'm not powerless. I don't need a God. None of that. And I walked out on day 28 with a bottle of vodka, thinking I'm fucking fine. And all the yets that they had told me about for the previous 28 days started happening pretty rapid. But I was then living this double life of where, to my family and to my ex, who's now back in my life, I was going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I had a big book. I'd go to meetings, fucking wrecked, and then they would understand the real me. Because I just wasn't ready. I mean, the seed was planted, right? Because that's the one thing I kept doing. I kept going to meetings for the next 4 years. And I had a desire to stop, but the fear of stopping was greater. The fear of doing life without a drink was huge. I couldn't, and I'm not even talking about fear of I'm not a fireman, I'm not running into burning buildings. I'm talking about fear of going into a work meeting, speaking to my boss, sending an email, going for lunch with my parents. I couldn't do any of it without a drink. Because back when I was 12, when I would have started doing, building up a bit of self-esteem, I'd stopped doing all that. So at the age of 35 at the time, 36, I had no self-esteem. I was still that scared 12-year-old, not knowing what to do, not knowing who I was, and I just couldn't cope. And the only way I could cope was by having a drink. So the next few years, I ended up bouncing in and out of treatment centres, doing the usual thing of going in there. I can't get drink, so I'll hook up with someone, or I started using aerosols randomly. Never done aerosols in my life until I went into treatment. And then I'd come straight back out and drink on the train home. And that was just my cycle. That's basically what I was doing. And I was paying for all of these, and I was like, it's fine. I'm happy to do it. And then I went into one place and I ended up staying there for 3 months. And it was the one time that actually someone sat me down on day one, and the guy said to me, everything that's happened to you in the past doesn't have to impact you today. And it's I know I'd probably heard that a million fucking times in meetings, in other places with therapists and counsellors, whatever. But he said it, and it's the first time I actually believed him. And I stayed there for 3 months and didn't hook up with anyone. I was a bit shitty on dating apps, but that's a work in progress. But And I was actually doing the programme, yeah. I was going to meetings, I had a sponsor, I was getting ready to leave. And about 2 weeks before I left, my mum had been very ill for basically 13 years. I'd broken a rule, basically. I kept my phone when I shouldn't have kept my phone. And I was meant to have gone into a dry house, and they turned around and said, because you broke the rule, you're not going to the dry house. So I then went home for that weekend, stayed at my parents', which is where I was living, because I'd lost my apartment, I'd lost my job, I was back on an airbed. So I went and stayed at my mum and dad's for that weekend. And I had a great chat with my mum that night, and she was like, I'm so proud of you and everything you're doing. And then 2 hours later, she was dead. Now, everyone thought that I would come out of that treatment centre and drink, yeah, but I didn't. I leaned into this stuff even more. I went to more meetings, yeah. I was fucking connected with people, and it was kind of like, I'd done everything, and just completely upped my game, right? And then what happened was, I got to 5 months on the day, and I woke up, and I can sit here and I can go, it's because I was still grieving my mum, it's because I got rejected from an ex, or whatever. It wasn't. I thought that I could have a drink and stop. Yeah. I was like, I'm 5 months, regardless of what I'd heard, for the 3.5 years or whatever I'd been coming into the meetings, that this stuff will happen, you're going to get these thoughts that you can do it and you can't. I thought, no, I'm different, I can. Like that day, I was due to go out for lunch with people in CA that afternoon. And at 9 a.m, I'm standing in an alley drinking vodka, right? But not a big bottle, I just bought 3 miniatures. And then I had those 3, and I thought, well, actually, my favourite number is 8, so I'll buy another 5. I'll buy another 5, and then I'll stop. And it weren't, right? And it's, I was off and running. And I went to that lunch with the people in CA, and we went to a meeting after, because that's what I'll do. I will do it I'll hide in plain sight, yeah? I won't lock myself away. I'll just tell everyone that I'm not drinking and that they're wrong. And I don't remember much for the next couple of months, to be honest. This is just from what my dad said, yeah? My dad said I got home that night, and he said it's the first time that he'd seen me come home and go, I fucked up and I'm banging trouble. Because I'd had that first drink, and that was it. I was running. And he said it was painful to watch over the next few months, because it's something that you didn't want to be doing, but yet you were still doing it. And he said, as your dad, it was one of the hardest things to see. But I didn't stop, I stopped going to meetings because I was so embarrassed. I was like, fucking hell, I got to 5 months. I can't go back to the meetings. They're going to laugh at me. So I just didn't go back. And then the usual thing happened. I ended up going back into treatment again. I came down to Bournemouth. It was meant to be for 28 days. Within days of getting there, I realised I needed to be there longer. I extended for another month. I went into a dry house after that for another month. And I haven't looked back since. I think I'm like 380 days, right? And it's just been incredible. Like, I can't sum up, right? Like how good I think my fucking life is, yeah? I wake up and I don't have a craving to drink. I don't wake up, I'm not fucking throwing up. I'm not got all this, fuck, what happened last night? What did I say in the meeting last night? I've got none of that. And that's because I went to a meeting, I met someone who shared their experience, and I thought, I like what he said. And it's as simple as that. I just liked what he said. He said, what's on offer is long-term continuous sobriety, 1 day at a time. And I'd probably heard that a million times. But that night I fucking believed it. And I thought, yeah, that sounds fucking kind of cool. I reckon, give this another go. And because I had those 5 months, I kind of wanted to get back to that feeling. And yeah, and then, so we went through the work, and I always used to say we went through it quickly, but we went through it as it's written. Like, we didn't hang about on any of the steps. You know, I didn't have 4 or 5 weeks to write my fucking step 4. It was like, right, you're on step 4, let's do it. And he made me accountable for my own sobriety, which again, I'd never had, right? Well, I'd always had, but I didn't want. You know, I made the rehabs, they were accountable, my old sponsor was accountable, you know, my ex-girlfriend was accountable, everyone else was accountable, apart from me. And he's made me accountable for it. You know, it's the action that I put in on a daily basis is what keeps me sober. And I've been able to, like, so in the past year, I've moved. So they say, you know, don't make big decisions. I've moved twice. You know, I've got a job. You know, I turn up every day to my job. Yeah, I'm reliable. You know, and even that's fucking hard. You know, I didn't work for 2 years, and before that, I was drinking every day. And so actually turning up to work is hard. Trying to concentrate for 9 hours is tough. And I can do that. And I'm happy to be able to do and accept just doing the best that I can on that day. So I don't set myself like, you know, some days I feel like I'm at 100%, other days I'm at 50, and I just accept it. I'm just like, okay, well, it is what it is. You know. I've been able to go on holiday. I've been able to get my nephews back in my life, right? So my brother had turned around and had said that he didn't want me seeing his kids. He no longer wanted anything to do with me. You know, my dad was letting me stay at his house, but he didn't really want me to do anything. He just didn't want his son to be homeless. You know, everyone kind of drew back. But because of the action that I put in, you know, and because I've got a program that I work towards every day, yeah, I'm going to get these people back into my life. Like, my brother invites me to go and stay at his house now. I can take my nephews out on my own. You know, I go to their football presentations and I'm actually there. You know, I'm not just passed out. I'm not. And it's fucking, you know, and it's really annoying because I just want to play fucking Lego all the time. And I have to catch myself because I'm just like, oh my God, it's like 7 o'clock in the morning, just leave me alone. But that's just because I can be a prick. Like, it is, that for me, that's what recovery is, right? It's getting the people that I love back into my life and being able to, like, have these moments with them. Because before that, you know, I might have been there, but I was never really present. You know, mind was always off. You know, I'd be sitting there flicking through Tinder. You know, rather than talking to anyone, I'd just be sitting there just scrolling, just no interest in anyone else. And it's allowed me to build connection with people. You know, I have been able to, like, look at the stuff I've done in the past. I've been able to forgive myself for things that have happened. You know, because that's been really difficult, and I've been able to accept stuff that's happened and realise that it just shouldn't have happened, regardless if I'm an addict or not. Some things just shouldn't have happened, and I've forgiven myself for that. And today I can just live free from all of that old self. You know, it's how long have we been talking?
18 minutes 45 seconds.
Touch. Yeah, I mean, look, this program offers everything. That's just it. It offers, you can do anything. My life today is not the life I'd ever had imagined. And it's going to sound really corny, but it's better. And I don't quite know why it's better. I don't know. It just is. But I just have this feeling, this piece within me that is amazing. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I certainly didn't think I'd be able to do life, sober. I'm getting into a new relationship. I'm doing that sober, and I'm not fucking lying. I'm not taking all my insecurities into and just dumping it on her, And that's what's on offer, It's just I don't even know what to say. It's just it's 12 steps, and that's what when I done the steps, right, when I finished them, I was like, that's it, done the steps. I was all fucking proud. I was like, nothing else to do. And then he was like, no, you've got to do the traditions, and then you've got to do chairs, and you've got to sponsor people. And I was like, fuck's sake. But it is like, it's, being able to do this is a massive privilege. It's a massive privilege to be able to do this. And it faces my fears of doing stuff. I would never have been able to do this before. My idea would have been have a drink. Don't like how that feels, pick up a drink, I can face things without the need. Or I can face my feelings. And I don't even really want to change my feelings. Whereas I used to always, I just didn't want to feel anything. So yeah, if you're new in, get a sponsor, but get the right sponsor. I know they say just get a sponsor, but get a sponsor you want to work with. Get a big book, do the work, and fucking world's your oyster. I'll leave it there. Thank you.